Hello, everybody, and welcome to our chat tonight with Tomas Moniz. And I'm excited to see you again, Tomas. It's been many, many years, I
Yes.
think. I don't know how the years go so quickly. And somewhere in the middle of that, I think we were supposed to be at a conference together, and then it became COVID time. And the closest we got was our two heads were next to each other in the conference poster. I remember that. But we
Yes.
decided to get a chance to meet and talk. So really lovely to see you again. And I can see a lot has happened in your life since we last spoke. So I want to catch us up on all of that. But mainly novelists in the room tonight. I know that that when we first met, you were I was introduced to you as a poet.
Mhm.
Um, so the focus tonight more on your two novels.
Mhm.
And maybe you can start us off by, well, let me tell everybody, because I'm assuming that everyone knows, but let me tell everybody a little bit more about you. So you are obviously a writer working in Oakland. Um, you wrote poetry. You edited these two anthologies, Rad Dad and Rad Families. And I think that you also wrote kids' books, right, at
One
one
kid's book,
time.
yeah.
One kid's book. So you've been doing like a lot of different things, and then in 2020, Big Familia came out, and then just this, is it this year or last year? Was it 24 or 25?
24
24.
last summer.
Right, last summer, your latest book, which is
Actually, I think the year anniversary is like in Tuesday. So
all
this is
right.
this
Okay,
is a
well,
nice come full
happy
circle.
birthday. Happy birthday. All friends are necessary. And you have been like very impressively picking up a whole bunch of awards along the way. So I'm gonna give this book a
Oh, and I love it that that book's got the two stickers on it because I got my first edition that's got no stickers before it won anything.
right.
So there you go.
You always have to re-buy your own book after you've been
This
awarded.
is true. I
So,
need to.
finalists for the Penn Hemingway, finalists for the Lambda, finalists for the Ford Review Indies Award, and then more recently this one, upside down now, sorry. More recently this one picked up the Golden Poppy, did
It won the Golden Poppy Award. They sent me this cute little card and stickers and
it? See, now you can sticker your books.
oh, I know. I'm very happy.
Okay,
Oh,
so
wait. I did sticker my book. There's one. It
woo!
kind of blends with the cover, but what can you do?
What can you do? So, why don't you start by giving us just like a quick I use the French word précis, but a quick description of what your two books are about, and then set some context before I ask you some questions about.
Sure. Well, maybe I'll flip it and I'll talk a little bit about how I kind of got started and ended up with the two novels, and then
Okay.
I can talk about what they're about. But yeah, I just want to say that, I've just enjoyed the process of writing since I was, in my mid 20s. And I think I came to writing through creative nonfiction. Before I was even a poet, I came to writing about like parenting and raising kids. I was a teen parent, and so I kind of discovered, if anyone knows Hip Mama, like these were like people who were like, how do we raise families that are different than the way we were raised, and kind of in touch with things like feminism and anti-capitalism. I think there's all the kind of like beautiful West Coast politics, right? Actually, those politics are everywhere, but this is where I was at, right? So
Right, right.
yeah, and I came to writing through that, and it's a wonderful, great indie DIY zine community. And I kind of cut my teeth writing and sharing writing with through letters and through zines. And so from that came the two anthologies, Rad Dad and Rad Families. And I really, really love those books. I'm very proud of the work that we did there.
Mhm.
And I think I kind of learned to write in that process of like telling how do you find that balance between aspiring, writing about what you would like to be versus the reality of where you are, right? Like the poor choices we make as parents, the things we regret, what we aspire to. And so I think once I kind of started evolving away from creative nonfiction, I started like realizing in my fiction or poetry, I could kind of like I didn't have to stick to the truth as much, which is kind of a very, after 10 years of writing creative nonfiction, where I was really conscious about truth telling, and getting the story, at least from my perspective, correct.
Hmm.
Um, Poetry and fiction allowed me to kind of just go wild, and that's really where I kind of fell into love with kind of writing again. And I could still deal with the same issues that I was dealing with in my creative nonfiction, but now I could do it through, character and voice. And so,
Right.
um, so then I actually started doing poetry as a way to kind of focus on little scenes. And also, I really enjoyed performing them. And those were the things when I shared with Elbows with you, that was a whole
Right.
process where I was writing about body parts. I was just like giving myself projects to do.
And there was a moment when I was reading where I thought, oh,
Yeah.
poem.
Which is what I like to say to all aspiring novelists as well, is because over the course of 10 years, I wrote so many small little poems. And then as I was editing this book, and we can get to this later in our conversation, but my editor was really like, let's find a weird way to do something. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. I have all these like fun little like prose pieces that don't really belong anywhere. But I was like, I could just tweak them into the character and they become their story. And I was like, so I really had a lot of fun going back over the course of 10 years of these little like poems that I'd written and finding a home in the novel. So that was a fun little experience. So anyways, those led me to the novels these two novels. Big Familia was something I had been working on for a little while. All my writing comes from, in some ways, I'm a really lazy writer, and like I do the math backwards. I'm like, all I have to do is get to 55,000 words, and that's like quote unquote a novel. So I would just start breaking down how many stories I needed to write to get and about 2,000 words is my like sweet spot. So if I can write, okay, how many stories need to be 2,500 words to get to 50,000? And then I would do that. So both of these novels kind of started. I tricked myself. They started as short stories that built into a novel.
Right.
So yeah, Big Familia is the story of a single father raising a daughter who's graduating high school, is about to go to college. Hint, hint. I was going through empty nest at the time, so it's very, so it's both like, very clearly connected to my experiences, but it's fiction. So I was free to write, not limited by like the story of my experience with
Hmm.
sending my kids off to college. So it's really kind of I was just really, it felt really liberating to let's just write a story, and find a story. And then he's finding a new lover, and he's trying to decide if he wants to recommit or not. And so that's kind of that story. And then All Friends is the story in some ways of kind of grief and how we heal from grief. It's the story again of someone returning home to the Bay Area after a kind of tragic loss. And it's not going to spoil the story if you know what the loss is. He loses a child in, at birth, with his partner. And so that ends the marriage, and it kind of ends his like, desire to be in where he's living at Seattle. And he returns home to his kind of group of friends that he knew growing up. And in that process, he's learning to heal. And then, of course, COVID hits. And so it goes from this kind of individual grief to collective trauma. And the evolution of the story is hopefully that, in the beginning, he needs to receive the help from friends. And by the end of the story, he's in a position to maybe offer help to other friends who are going through a similar situation. So I didn't see it at the time, but that was kind of the arc as it worked out. And so those are the two stories. And I'm really happy that I've been able to get them out into the world.
Well, and I'm really happy you did too, because I enjoyed reading
Oh,
them.
thank you.
My first question was, and you kind of answered it,
Oh, shoot.
but kind
Cut
of,
me off. If I'm a talker, cut me off.
no, by all means, talk as much as you want. We're here to listen to you talk, Tomas. Um, but no, what I was thinking as I said, like when I was reading, I had this moment where I thought, oh, that little poem kind of might have come out of this, like might have been part of this. Like the actual poem didn't find its way in, but other poems did. Um, so I wondered how autobiographical was this? So I know that it's fiction. I know that fiction is freeing, but as you said, you're going through the empty nest syndrome yourself, um, and there's definitely between the two books. It's funny. It's really interesting to me actually that the title of one book is Big Familia, and the title of the other one is All Friends Are Necessary. But the book about family turns out to be a book about friends, and the book about friends is a book about family, right?
Right.
So I was wondering how much of that is you?
Right. Well, you can clearly see, like, and I don't know about you all as writers, when you kind of look at the body of your work, you can see the themes coming up over and over again. And sometimes, when I journal, sometimes I realize I'm so sick of myself and writing this. In some ways, I feel like I write the same story. Like clearly something's going on, right? Like it's usually parenting, it's usually family, it's usually chosen family. I definitely write. I love the body, and I try to write as viscerally and like physically as possible. Those things are like this. If I would think about my style, that's it. And
Mhm.
so, obviously, I feel like I put a lot of myself into the voice of the story. And I think that's something I really I craft wise, I love talking with other writers about this is because it's like I feel like a novel lives and dies on like the voice of the character. And I'm not talking about whether it's in first person or third person. It's just that the voice of the book. And to me, that's the creative element and that's the freeing element because I mean it's not as much as I like to think these are my voices, they're not. They're like they allow me to consider ways and make choices that I haven't done, right? Or I ever, I wonder what I would do in these situations. So it allows me to like imagine, and I think that's what I really appreciate about the books. They're all rooted in a sense of my experience and my, the issues that I find fascinating. But and then also I think as a writer, I try to take those. I see that I'm writing the same thing, and I try and then push it or tweak it so it goes someplace new. And I think
Mhm.
hopefully that's what I do because I don't want to do the same book over and over and over again. Although I will say, and we could talk about this later in the publishing part, I've written a book in between this book, and it was harder to sell that book because I think they wanted, and you can see the similarities in the voices in both of these books, and
Right,
you can see that's what they're wanting to buy, right? Like
right.
they see a voice and they like it. So it's a little frustrating because sometimes like they pigeonhole you, right? They don't want you to do something different.
Mhm.
Or I mean, it's not they don't want you to do, they just won't buy it, right? They
Right.
think they think they have a way to market you, and that's the business side we'll get to in a second. But yeah, so just to swing back to your question, it's loosely autobiographical, but it's not. Like, I mean, I think these are very, I never lost a shot. I mean, well, I guess I take that back, but not in the way that he's done, right? And I've never, so it's clearly these are fictional worlds, but yet the themes that I continually return to are there.
Right. Okay, so a couple of interesting things that coming out of there that I want to ask you about. One is voice. So if I don't remind me, come back to voice. The other one is though that so in All Friends, there is at a certain point in the book, we hear the protagonist's mother speaking, and she's actually not speaking to the protagonist, she's speaking to the protagonist's father. And she says, uh she's she's asked her husband, the father, to pick the baby up, and the father's relating this. He says your mama told me to pick you up, so I did. I picked you up. I held your little naked body against mine, took off my shirt so you could be against my skin, and this did something for you because you fell asleep. And that was when your mama said to me, how do you feel? And I said, wonderful. And she said, remember that when you take care of something, you're really taking care of yourself,
Right.
which I thought was so beautiful. But I think it's like very resonant in both books. That this is, to me, this is what I felt like, a very deep theme of the books was.
Right.
It's this opening up. In both cases, your protagonists, for different reasons, have a little problem opening up. But
Hmm.
yeah, so to my second question, Tomas, well, yeah, I didn't think you had any problems opening up, but I was reading this going,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I thank you for reading that passage. Sometimes I love hearing the work you do read by someone else because it's so like, oh wow, I wrote that. That's kind of interesting. And I actually do really remember that scene and writing it. And I had written that in a poem in a different context before, and I just there was this way in which I needed to connect the beginning and the ending section, and those poems worked. And I just remember that line that you read, and I was just like, that's such a, I love that line. Like it really is, and that's in some ways for me. And I don't know about you all. Maybe we could talk about this later. Like I don't go into writing with an idea of what I'm trying to accomplish, but then I start seeing it develop as I let the story kind of the story and character just kind of grow. And you're
right,
right. I think the idea of opening up and learning to care becomes central to definitely Efren, but also here with Juan as well in the in Big Familia.
Right, right. So this is a perfect segue then kind of into craft. You were talking about watching your themes develop.
Uh-huh.
So and you've written much shorter pieces before, right? As had I when I first attempted a novel.
Mhm.
So I think that you and I played the same trick
Yes.
on our sides. I don't know if you're still in touch with Cara Werner, but I remember saying to Cara, okay, so here's a novel. It needs to be 80,000 words. So
You already are writing longer than me. I'm like, if I Google that thing, 55,000, I'm not going a word over. No.
so I was like, oh, 80,000. And for easy math, but well, if I write four no, like novellas, like
Right.
four long short stories, and I stitch them together, then I'm
Right.
gonna have this novel. And it kind of worked out that way because I have three protagonists in my novel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but it started off almost as a cheat to
Hmm.
say to myself, you can do this. You can just like swim to the next, like
Exactly.
the next little rock and then swim on instead of having
Exactly.
the ocean all in one go. Um, but uh I kind of lost my train of thought now. I was going to ask you something about that. Oh, yes. So when you're talking about watching your themes develop, so when you do sit down, obviously these these ideas about family, about friendship, about like opening up and connection are important to you. But like, how, like, what gets you started? Like, do you all of a sudden do you know one, or is like effort starting to niggle in your brain? Like, what
Right.
actually drives this? If you don't really if you're not sitting down, and I'm assuming that you're not, I mean, some writers sit down with a plot and
No.
I want to write this arc. But so where are you starting and what's driving?
Yeah, I think this question's come up. I think we all face this question, like, how do we start? And for me, it really is just there's something about a tone or a moment that captures my kind of curiosity, and I write into that. Like, so, I think this book, the first thing I wrote about this book was I got into a joking argument with a friend about Elliott Smith. And I don't know if people know Elliott Smith, but if you don't, listen to Elliott Smith. But he's very like a sad boy music. But I was like, he's not sad, right? And he's like, and my friends were all like, you're wrong. He's very sad. And I was like, he's not. So, anyways, I jokingly was like, okay. I'm gonna, write a little story that I'm gonna use Elliott Smith lines in each of the small chapters, and it was like 1,000 word story, so it was really small. Like that's for me like something I can accomplish, and I did it. And from that I was like, oh, it was a story that comes from the story of Big Familia. That was the germination for Big Familia. It was this character, and so that's how it started. I just kind of got like I kind of like the voice and the way somehow I wrote his cadence of speaking and kind of the context where I put him in. He's living in Berkeley. I was living in Berkeley at the time. I really kind of trust that like the follow that what I hate the statement write what you know because I don't believe it, but I do think write what excites you and inspires you. And so, you can think about like biking around Berkeley, that's in that book, like dating at the time, that's in that book, like all the fun things that like I was thinking about find a way into like the story, but they become the character's journey and not mine. So that's kind of how I start, like small. I don't overthink it. In fact, actually, if I think about trying, I'm going to do a novel, I'm like I immediately like get stuck. Like I don't know what to do, and I think I really got to break it down into small, manageable. Like don't stress. But I'm also, and this is my problem though, I'm a very like slow typer. I type with little two fingers. And so when I write 1,000 words, like I want to keep all of it. And so, like I had a friend, I was talking with Kate Folk just recently, and she was saying that she wrote 100,000 words outside of her novel. And I was
Oh,
like, that is insane. Like I was like, I feel like you're lying to me. Like, but that's her process. She journaled a lot. And so I'm
right,
much more concise with my writing. And so I feel like I just start small until I like what I'm doing, and then I start building on it.
right,
That makes
right.
sense.
So, and then you told us that there was a second book like that actually didn't get published before you came to All Friends Are Necessary. So what was that second book about?
Well, I love the second book, and I've actually got a third book now that's already on submission. But the second book was it was the story of a young woman, and it was I love the story. I think it really worked well, but I think the challenge was I wrote it kind of predominantly first person point of view from her. And I think my editor was like, I don't know if we can do a story, a first person woman at this time. Like, and
Right.
so I get it. Like, and I wish I would, part of me feels like, well, why don't we try and see if it, because if it doesn't work, people aren't going to like it, and that's fine. Like, um, and if it does work, then great. Then it works, and then it can stand alone because they're right. And that brings up the larger issue of like whose story is it to tell, and I recognize that that's really really important. And so, but that's what the story was, and I loved it. It's a story about like her. She grew up in like a anarchist commune in Oregon, and she comes down to the Bay Area and the kind of tech boom, and then her sister disappears in Oakland as well, but like doing kind of more radical stuff, and she's kind of in that tech world, and so it's just kind of the coming together of that stuff. So I loved it; it was great, But I feel like it'll be my fourth book. Maybe at that I'll earn the, what is it, the credibility to be able to
Right.
own a voice like that. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think the pendulum is swinging back to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to say. Like, as I feel like, yeah, I mean, I really respect that conversation. I really want to, interrogate myself, in the choices I'm making, because I mean, there's characters that are, in here that aren't also like, my specific sense of identity, but, like how you do, and maybe, so I think it's a worthwhile thing to consider. But I also will say, I learned a lot writing that book, even though, I mean, it was 60,000 words. I put a lot of effort in and sitting on my desk going nowhere, but I learned a lot. So I feel like I'm a better writer for writing that book. And I think, I can see the trajectory of my writing as it's going.
I I noticed also when you were talking about voice, right, that a lot of people uh and you were careful to distinguish, we're not talking about point of view, we're actually uh but for a lot of people it's like there are two voices. There's the author's voice, and there's the voice of the particular narrator or the particular book, or the particular protagonist. And I think that when you said that you found that they had a harder time like with the second book, and then what they really wanted was that voice again, because they
Yes.
knew that that was selling and that was popular in the market. So I was wondering how you felt about this, especially like writing. Both your books are in first person. How do you distinguish? Career wise, it's important for the author to have a voice, right? That's what
Right.
your readers come back for. But how do you then make that voice different enough to be the voice of a particular book or a particular protagonist? Like, how did you work with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I say I think I got better by experimenting with different voices. So, the main character in the second book that didn't sell is her name is Dolly, and like I learned so much finding her voice, and I think I did find it. I think it's a really good, strong voice, and that's partly why they tried to say like, would you want to write this in like third person? Because it was a first person narrative, and I was like, I just think it's not. That is going to be me like telling her story, and I don't want that. Like I wanted to find a way to like allow her to tell the story, and I think it works. At least I think it works. Whether it does or not, we don't know. But I think that's the thing is like just and experimenting like well, in All Friends it's again, I'm a lazy typer, and so and reviser, even though I love revision. The first part of All Friends is written in first person present tense, and then the third section is actually written in first person past tense. And so, but I was like, how can you do that? You can't have that in this one story. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like, so I tried to figure out like, what am I going to do? So there's that third section that kind of becomes weirdly like, not experimental, but in my mind, it replicated the way ferns, procreate, right? They spores into the world. So all these little stories get thrown out. And then it gives us, like, let's say, a narrative shift that allows me to write in the past tense, but still from first person. And I think, because I think the voice had to shift in that section. He's no longer Chino, he's Efren, right? And so
Right,
how do
right.
we make that distinction? Well, part of that distinction stylistically was that it was in past tense because he had come to some wisdom, hopefully. I mean, who knows if characters get wise, right? But in my mind, like that immediacy of first person present tense was the beginning, and the reflection was the third part. And so, I think that's how I come to find voice. The novel I'm on submission right now is an elderly gentleman written in third person, which I'm really enjoying, and I feel like he's got a real voice, even though it's in third person.
Right.
He is voice. Once you find that voice, it like I think flows through the narrative, regardless of whether it's in third, first, second,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. You had mentioned that you had an editor who said, let's try something a little different here. Is
Yeah.
that was that like did that prompt this kind of, it is an unusual structure in All Friends. Like
Right.
you're going along in first in first person present,
Exactly.
thinking that you're going to do the whole book this way, and then all of a sudden we break out into that section where it's all little short, I won't even say they're just like little missives
Yeah.
direct
They're
from the
spores. They're like ferns. Just let's work with it. That's what I wanted, right?
right. And did that come was that kind of more experimental structure like prompted by an editor going, let's do something
Yeah,
different?
it was. I mean, I loved so yeah, my editor was great, and it was funny. I sold All Friends, and it was 10,000 words shorter than it is now. Like it was, he saw I mean, so talk about like recognizing a sale, right? Like he saw the story, he was like, this can work. He bought it, and he tricked me by revising part one, right? And just like it's great. Let's just do this one section. And so he got me to like fill out. He asked me questions. He pointed out like moments where he wanted maybe me to sit a little bit into the scene a little bit. And then I did the next section, which was ended up being the final section, and same thing. So he added five, and then he was like, "We need that bridge," and like, this is the time to lean into the weird. He said, like, you can do it, right? Like, we can always bring it back, right? Like, but now, and so I had all kinds of weird things happening before, like I was like, maybe I'll do it in a lot, I was just like getting crazy, and he just let me do it, and I found myself kind of whittling it down to finding for me, the image that made it work was like, yeah, these little things of multiple voices from different perspectives that aren't his, and then that then of course allowed, and I also had a section where I wrote about 3 pages explaining the shift from first past tense from present tense to past tense, and he helped me edit that down to literally, I think it's one sentence where it acknowledges there's a switch, right? And it's so small, I think half the people miss it, but it's
Right.
there. Like if you needed to see it, it's there.
Oh, I think I missed it. I just
Yeah,
kind of went with your spores.
there we go, and that's what worked, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. So all right. Before I move on, I have a question coming off that. Before I move on and leave this too far behind, I also wanted to ask you about the way that you treat dialogue, because what you do in both books is that the the protagonist, the first person, the protagonist is telling us like what's happening in such a way that even dialogue is reported, right? You drop all the inverted commas off it, and the protagonist says, and then he said blah.
Right.
So, and was that conscious choice on your part?
I feel like so, we were talking about voice with character. I feel like, when we talk about the author's voice, for me, it's not about the voice, it's more about like its author's style. And I think I found that style, um, early on as I was writing my creative nonfiction, where I was like just, talking about like conversations I'm even having like so, and I just kind of liked the immediacy, the intimacy of like the lack of formality, like the quotation marks aren't there. There's this kind of like way it felt very like we were part of the conversation. And that immediately struck me. And there's other writers who have done it, like, Juno Diaz did it, Toni Morrison did it. Like and it's certainly a little bit more in vogue now, but and I had editors when I did short stories be like, we have to put all the quotation marks on there. And I was kind of like, no. And then one said, well, you're not going to get, $400. I'm like, okay, then put the quotation marks, so, like there's moments I was like, sell it, right? Like I can deal with that later. And it was a good choice. Like, so I think that's for me, and for me, dialogue is like, that's my favorite part because I'm not the most loquacious writer. Like I don't do a lot of descriptive writing. I mean, sometimes I feel like I do, and my editor was like, "No, that's not your style. Like that's not. Don't ever worry about overwriting." I'm like, "Okay, I needed to hear that." But so because dialogue really is the heartbeat for me as a writer, and so
Right. I think
um,
in Big Familia especially, it's like the story is told almost 90% by
yeah,
Agree.
exactly.
Yeah.
And again, that's an example where I learned a lot having to do that. Like I made a lot of, and I did a lot of reading that aloud because I felt like if I was ever confused, then it's going to be confusing obviously it's going to be confusing for the reader. So, and I still have people tell me that it didn't work for them. So I'm always like, okay, well, it doesn't work for people.
It worked for me,
Yeah.
but I think I might have gotten something slightly different out of it from what you're describing. In that for me, it made me feel like it made me feel that instead of like being there watching a story in which the protagonist is taking part, it made me feel like I was watching the whole thing through the eyes
Nice.
of the protagonist. It like actually sinks you really deeper into that point of
Yeah,
view.
yeah, yeah. I think that's kind of what I was trying to say with intimacy. I think that there's something that is really, there's not a lot of separation between reader and the world that's happening in that moment. And I also should say, again, I recognize I'm a very lazy typer. And so for me doing this, I was like, if I have to go like, space bar, capital thing, like that's this whole two extra moves. And I was in the mood. And so, I was flowing. So I kind of came back, that came out of both necessity and style choice.
Well, that's the most amusing description I've ever heard. Like reason
I
why
want to make it
you
some
went.
big artistic bold statement. I'm like, no, I'm just lazy and like I just
I
didn't want to
just
write.
didn't want to do the ship, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
Monday. That's hilarious. Okay, so the other thing that was not maybe, and I don't know the story. I just like kind of picked up on it with, but a little bit more unusual was that your current agent did not start out as your first agent, right? Because she wrote you a letter when she read
Mhm.
your first book. So, so exactly how did this all happen? So let's go back to Rad Dad and Rad Families. It's like where you said you started off writing with zines and everything. All those interactions, I'm assuming, are like directly between you and the zine and the publication. At what point did you um think, okay, now I need to get an agent? Like,
Yeah, I kind of was like, I'm a bad business person, I should say, because I never even wanted an agent. I was like so, brought up in the, writing world of like do it yourself. And so, I was kind of self-publishing is kind of a complicated word, but like that's kind of what zines are, right? Like I'm doing it, I'm in control at the aesthetic, the editing. I've got legendary typos in all my like zines, like they're very beautiful and I love them all. In fact, when we did a little anthology, that's not the two main anthology, I was like, keep all the typos because that's part of what was so fun about the zines, right? Um, but I never had an agent. Like I sold Big Familia just, directly to the publisher was me. So I tried to get with this book, I tried to get an agent, right? Like I sent maybe, the query, I did the query thing for 6 months or so. And I have a funny story with this. Like, I sent about, I would, all the books that I read that I really liked, I looked in the acknowledgments, I found the editor or the agent, I should say, and did a little bit of research on them. And then, if I kind of felt like they would resonate with me, I sent them my query letter. I think maybe I got one or two responses out of maybe 30 editors or agents, excuse me. And then it got the two awards. And then at that point, it was so funny. I got all these like agent emails saying, "Hey, are you looking for an agent?" And half of them were people I had literally emailed 6 months ago that I never heard from. So I was just like, wow, whatever. But then you're right. My only agent had read the book, and some of them like clearly had not read the book. They were just like, I mean, that's how they can make their money too. Is they see someone. If you don't have an agent, and you're like, look like your next book might sell something, maybe I can represent you. So, but she had read Big Familia, and in the back of all my books, and I encourage everyone to do this, is if you can put an address there, someone can write you, because I get the best letter. It is the best thing. Better than the awards. Any little money I've received is the letters I get randomly from people across the United States, even in Europe and Canada. I mean, I don't get a lot, but I get probably 5 or 6 letters a month, maybe sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little less, and they're wonderful. But yeah, so she wrote me a letter, and so I immediately like emailed her. I really wanted to just write her a letter back, but I was like too excited to get an agent, so I emailed her and I met her. And I was seeing my daughter who was living in New York at the time. So I just kind of planned a trip and we met and it was wonderful. And she was great. She's really been wonderful.
so what did her letter say?
She just talked about the book. I mean, it was clear that she had read the book and she liked it and she thought about it. And then she asked me for if I was looking for representation. And then immediately I said yes. And she asked if I was working on something new. And I said, I got it. And that was, the Dolly one. So I sent it to her and we worked on that. And she read it and she loved it. And, but we never got any bites on it. And we were going to try and do smaller presses again.
Hmm.
And she said, "Well, do you have anything else though?" And I said, "Well, I have this kind of hodgepodge novel, and it was all friends." And I said, "It's a little dirty. It's got a lot of sex in it." And she's like, "Let's try sell that one." And then, of course, literally, 2 days later, it sells. So I don't know, right?
So wait, slow down. Tell us about that. So it goes down in submission, gets picked up in 2 days by Algonquin.
Algonquin, yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you the story. It's kind of fun, but well, I mean, it wasn't that quick. She was like, okay, why don't you take a month and work on this messy novel that I said? And I was like, okay, let me do that. So, and I told you it was only 45,000 words. That's not a novel. But I was like, it's done. And I said, try it. We'll see. She read it, and I think I gave it to her in December. She read it over December, and she said, "Okay, let's just do it in mid-January." And then so mid-January we sent it out, and that was then 2 days later. I got a Evan. He was like, I think it was like a lot about timing, as is so many things, right? Like he was a new editor at Algonquin. He was really excited to bring in new voices, so he loved my book. We met, on the phone, and he had a great. I mean, he was. This experience with this editor was phenomenal. Like I can't. I've heard some mixed reviews of people having it, but he was just like, "I'm so excited for this book. I really want to support you doing it. Here's what I'm thinking. Tell me if it resonates with you." And I was like, and I'm also really good. Like at some point, I know the novels, I can't take it further than it is. I need that outside like push, right? And so I was all ready. I just said, "You tell me what to do, and I'll do it. Like I trust you." And anyways, he made an offer, and he made an offer for $20,000, and I was like, "Take it, yes." I mean, I sold Big Familia for $500, right? I thought that was a lot. I spent it all on like dinner that night because I was so excited, right? Me and a bunch of my friends. So this one, he said $20,000. I'm like, take it. And then my agent was like, slow down. Let me do my job now. And she was like, okay, Evan, thank you. I'm gonna give the 10 other presses or publishers the weekend to make a counter offer unless you want to give $50,000. And he was like, I can give $40,000, but you have to respond, you have to let me know today. And so then I was just like, and then I felt like for me, I was very thankful that I trusted myself because I loved Evan, and I think that's a really important decision, right? Um, we could have tried to see if we were going to sell it for more, but I don't think it's not a Simon and Schuster big beach book, right? Like I was just like, I feel like Algonquin's a good spot for it to land. They only do one or two books a month. And I'm not, going to be a part of 15 books coming out in one month. Um, and so I said, yeah, take the 40,000 and we'll work with Evan. And so that's how, but it did happen quickly, like, in a 2-day window, but it felt like it was 2 years that we were working together to get to that moment and it's over. And you're just like, wow, that's weird. It
Right.
happened so quick.
Oh, that's great. And congratulations. And Eleanor obviously, earned her pay right there by
Right
telling.
then. Well, yeah, I know she did a lot of work. I mean, she helped. I mean, she worked on a whole novel with me that we didn't sell. Right. And,
Yes,
um,
but you didn't
so all
sell it
that
yet.
work she didn't get paid for, you know. That's one of the things I realized with editor or agents. It's like they actually do a lot of work, and I hadn't. I mean, what did she make? 12% off of me after 3 years of work out of $40,000? That's nothing, right? How do you make a living off of that, right? Like so.
Right.
It,
Well, you
it,
pick a few big ones. That's what
yeah,
everyone's in the game for,
yeah, exactly.
unfortunately. Because actually, I was talking with my agent about how the things that we complain about, you know, that we want books to be published because they're beautiful books, not
Yeah,
because they're like big books, but at the same time, we're all part of this industry where everyone is looking for the for the next big hit.
yeah, definitely.
So, but so then Eleanor writes you a letter. You guys are off to the races. You get this book published. Algonquin picks it up. I think someone dropped into chat that Algonquin is a great place to land because
Yeah.
obviously it is. It's a wonderful.
It was, although this last year everything has been, shuffled around. So they got subsumed by Little Brown.
Right,
and
right.
they let go of my editor, and they let
That's a
go
shame.
like five editors.
Yeah, I heard that they pulled the rug. But has he landed somewhere else where he can
So he
pull?
just got a job acquiring nonfiction, I think back at Little Brown. I mean, so it's weird. But he's not acquiring fiction anymore. And that's partly why. So, anyways, I got assigned an editor and a great editor, Kathy Portis. She worked on Gabriel Zavin's books. The person who wrote Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, like that
Mhm.
big. She got so big she left Algonquin to the massive. I got like a $1.5 million deal for that book. But so I really appreciate her, but she's not, she didn't choose me. And so we got to see. And they have my new book right now, and they did hire. So I was a little bit worried because I was thinking maybe they're just kind of ending Algonquin as they cut
Mhm.
everyone. Uh,
Right,
but they hired Naji from Flatiron, who's like a kind of up and coming senior editor.
right.
So it was Vanessa Waz, editor at Flatiron. She's now senior editor now at Algonquin. So we'll see. I'm
Right.
gonna hopefully they make an offer and I'll figure it out. But it's kind of it's hard right now in publishing.
Yeah. Well, yes, but it's always been hard in publishing.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
publishing has just been really
They're
hard.
always complaining. Just pay us.
I just remember like when I first got into publishing, which was in like 2002,
Uh-huh.
people were saying, "Oh, but this is a really bad time to get into publishing." And ever since then, every 5 years, it's like, "Oh no, this
Oh,
is
it's a really bad
the
time.
year."
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just got to get on with it. But so this is like really super exciting. It's a shame that you lost your editor. I think that most
Yeah.
of us would dream of having an editor that says, let's try something different, like
Right.
go play here.
Right.
Instead of like the opposite, which is always like pulling it back to
Yeah.
the profit principle. So so that's lovely. But you have your third one and it's Kathy who's reading it.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Thank you.
Any idea when you're gonna hear?
They're late. They keep so she read it and we had a meeting and she said, I would like to work with you. Are you willing to do these changes that she made? And I was like, yeah, these sound like great changes, right? Like that's why I'm so excited to collaborate with an editor.
Mhm.
Um, and she said, well, okay, so I don't have final say. We have to move it up the chain to the Sally Kim, who is in charge of everything, I guess, at Little Brown, including Algonquin, and Naji. I can forget Naji's last name, but the two senior editors, and I'm just kind of waiting for them to meet and talk about it. But I don't know. It's been like 2 weeks, so it feels to me like if they wanted me, they'd make a move, right? And otherwise, but I don't know. It's
In
like my
2 weeks? No.
yeah, Eleanor, my agent, keeps saying, "Patience, patience.
Yeah,
It's a it's a weird time, and it's a weird time, particularly for Algonquin, because they're everything got shuffled around, people got laid off. Like,
right,
she doesn't think they're like doing a lot of acquiring right now, anyways. But they've
right.
got obligations to fulfill from contracts, and that contract obligation was to look at my book and give me a yes or no. In 45 days, it's now been like 65 days, but they've said they wanted it, but they've got to figure out the business element of it. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I think that publishing sometimes moves really, really slow as molasses. And
It does.
but when you're on the other side of the desk, because I used to be on the other side of the
Oh, did
desk,
you? That's right.
yeah, I own my own publishing
That's
company.
right. Yeah.
And you now and then once I did that, I was like, oh, now it makes complete sense that you can't get to some things for two
Right.
weeks. You just,
Right.
you're too busy trying to keep the lights on
Right.
to
Exactly.
get there. But so I'm hoping that that's all it is. And the yes is coming, it's coming slowly.
I hope so. I'll let you know if it happens.
Good. I hope you do. And what's happening writing wise? What are you working on now?
Well, I was very excited to do this literary erotic thriller. I think
Oh.
it was juicy and political, and I was writing it about 6 months up before the election happened, and then as I started realizing this, it got close, and then the election happened, and I just lost all my mojo around it because the idea was I was kind of obsessed with like young men of color who get involved in kind of the alt-right movement. Like I don't understand how
Mhm.
how they embrace that contradiction. And as someone who's got, you know, contradictory senses of self all the time. I know that you do a lot of interior work to make peace, right? And so, and I have people in my own family. I was just in New Mexico with my family, and like, there's cousins of mine. I'm like, how are you? Like, how are you? How? Right? I don't, it doesn't make rational sense to me to be a part of that scene. And so my idea was to write a story, and one of the protagonists was like a young man of color who's kind of like, it wasn't about Trump, because I never even say Trump, but
Right,
like the Proud Boys, that kind of like toxic masculinity, which is something again that's in all of my books, right?
right,
This kind of undoing kind of patriarchal notions of what it means to be a man.
right.
So he was one of the key central characters, but then what but I think I was having more fun with it and finding weird ways to be empathetic with this character when they were no longer close to power, and it just doesn't feel fun anymore. And so I'm a little bit I'm trying to write my way back into it. Like my editor, I mean, excuse me, my agent was really good. She's like, it doesn't feel right in this moment now, so I stopped. But she says, give yourself 6 months, and it might be actually the story we need to hear. Like it might be you might find a way into this, back into this story, and that's kind of what. So the last 2 weeks, I've been, if I can do 500 words a day, and just kind of
Mhm.
see if I can find my way back into it in a pleasurable way. Um, so that's where
Cousin,
I'm at. It's kind of, but I like it because it's a good, so the idea was like, the idea was that there's this like kind of couple, and he's got to like, he starts messing with, it's a little bit like Fatal Attraction meets January 6th. That was my pre-Trump election way to pitch it.
yeah,
I don't like it
tagline.
anymore, but it's still, it's juicy. It was really, it's got a lot of like political questions. Like, what is it?
Right.
Yeah. Like, what do we do for our so that I was having fun with it, but it's hard now.
Yeah, I can see both. I'm curious as to whether you have relationships with your cousins that allow you to actually have conversations where you can
No, I don't,
explore.
no interest in having relationships with them, but so that's been also the hard part. And that's partly why I was coming at it. And there's this great book called Defectors that came out before the election. And it was kind of about like how particularly Latino men are, voting, in this more conservative way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reading that, and so there's stuff out there, and obviously we can see, with even the election happening and all the breakdown of voting, like that's a real issue. And so I'm starting to figure out like maybe that's how I can come back to it, is like in a more journalistic way. Talking about style, like there's three voices, so I'd love to hear how you did three voices in the story in your novel. And his voice, I consciously chose to be third person because I didn't want to be the I of him, right? Like I wanted to write from him, but not have it be that intimate. And so
Right,
that's actually, I'm so thankful I did that because it's allowing me to come back to the story and not feel like I'm putting his clothes on, right? Because that would be yucky.
right, right. Interesting. I think that one of the things that's making me think right now is um the have you I think I'm gonna attribute it to the wrong book is my problem. I think so the there's have you read The Emotional Craft of Fiction? Donald
No,
Mann's book? Okay.
let me write it down. Oh, put it in the chat, someone.
And
Emotional.
The Emotional Craft of it's either art or craft of fiction. And it's written by Donald Mass, who's this like big time New York agent. Um, and he has this really interesting idea that beyond the arc, beyond the emotional arc of the protagonist, you're also taking the reader on an arc. And so
Right.
there's like his argument is for being aware of the arc that you're bringing the reader on, which is not the same as the arc that you're bringing your protagonist on. So, I think for some reason, I always think that it's from that book, but I actually think that this is a misattribution and it comes from another book. But I stumbled across, and maybe it is him. So let's just say it's him for now. But across this thing that said that, you have to, as an author, you have to find a way to make even the most heinous person,
Right.
understandable and relatable.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to redeem them, but
Right.
So I was wondering how you do that with, like you said, in this moment it feels really yucky and you don't
Right.
even want to have relationships with your cousins and stuff. But if you don't understand that protagonist, and how do you find the empathy and the for
Right.
that protagonist that then makes that protagonist come alive on the page? You know?
Right. Yeah, no, that's the key question. And I feel like I was really learning about my own self and my writing craft because like, I could see myself editing. Like I would want him like when I did get to his sections and I was writing them, I'd want him to, I was like, I didn't know like I had a hard time writing like super sexist stuff. And I was trying to figure out like how is he going to be sexist? Like, can he be sexist in a not so bad way? Like, how can he be homophobic? How can he be, and I was also like, he's got to, I don't want him to be like, I don't want him to be like ignorant, right? Like I want him to be like a normal, rational person that's choosing consciously these choices because I feel like that's more interesting than it is be like this. You know, and so I was trying to like I was really struggling with how do I rationally understand like, racism and sexism and homophobia and write scenes where he's engaging in that behavior consciously, right? And so but I could feel myself having a hard time like writing it. And yeah, it was weird. And so I'd write these little scenes that like somehow redeemed him, like in little moments where he was nice to someone, and then he would, be and it was just I was learning a lot of like, and then then I was doing a lot of reading about like, what is it like to write problematic characters, right? Like, I mean, people do, and people say that it's important to do that, but I was really struggling with like letting myself write because it felt like I was writing something real dirty, like I was gonna be in trouble, right? Like, and which of course I needed to unpack for myself as a writer. Like, what does that mean? Like, I'm having a hard time even just writing this. Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting, right?
Yeah, I kind of, and there's always, yeah,
Like
like
I
you
think
said,
bad choices are interesting. Like I can do that. I think like, hopefully, and I even struggled in these books. So I have like, I remember my editor like the what is it, the word like the consequences needed to be up in a couple things, right? And so like I did like go back and make the poor choices my character was making and like there's a scene of the father talking about the daughter and she gets pregnant and he's like, do you know who the father is? Like I wanted like bad parental decisions in that moment, right? Rather than what I would hope I would do in that moment, which is support, my daughter or friend or whomever, right? Was in this crisis moment. And so it felt like I feel like I could do it's I found a lot more like joy in the writing process playing with bad decisions that were based on just like a mistake, right? Versus like, oh, this one is hurting people really, intensely,
mhm,
and
mhm.
I'm not like editing it, right? Like I'm not fixing it, right? It's just there, and like that's hard to look at as on the page.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard to be around. And that's the thing too
Yeah.
about writing is that you have to be around what you're creating.
Yeah, if you're doing a novel, like I got to be in this guy's like head for another. Like I'm already doing the math. I got 60,000. I got 25,000 more words to write. And I'm already like breaking it down. If I do like 20,000 words in one character, 20,000 in his, 20,000 in this other character, like okay, like
Right. I only have to be in his head for,
20,000 words. That's not that bad. I think I've got 10 left to go. So we'll see.
that's really funny. So I want to take a step back before we lose it, which is that you approached so your first book was actually brought out by a university press. So
Yeah.
some of the writers on here have been in my classes where we're talking about the different kinds of publishing. And then the second one was all Algonquin, and I think just in before Algonquin took the big hit, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you like what was the difference? What was your experiential difference between working with the two publishers? Like, did you get, oh, it sounds like you got a lot more editorial attention from Algonquin. Like,
Oh yeah, like well, I will say 100% the pleasure of working with a small press was that you were involved. You could be involved. It felt like I was involved in every stage that I wanted to be involved in. Like you don't have to. Sometimes it's really nice to like, as someone who did all the self-publishing, like it was nice to be like, you take care of it, right? Like I don't want to take care of it, right? with Big Familia, like the image here is an artist I know locally, and I asked him to do a painting for me, and he did the painting, and I gave it to them, and they agreed, this is great, let's do it. So like versus this one, they said I'd have collaboration on the cover, and I got an email saying, "Here's our choices. What do you think?" Right? I'm like, that's not collaboration. That's like consent. That's like yes or no, right? Like, could I say no? Right? And but they did give me a little bit of wiggle room because like when they first sent the cover, there was no bike, there was no like bottles of alcohol, so it felt like it was too young. So I said, why don't you? And there was no skin. Like I told them, like, why don't you cut off? Like the woman's got hair under her arms here. I was like, show more skin, put a 6 pack of beer in there, and put a bike, and then it feels a little bit more adult. So, and they worked with me on that one, so that was nice. Yeah, but the drawback for the small presses was I didn't get a lot of editorial help, and maybe that just was the editor from um, Acre Books, which is out of the University of Cincinnati, I think. Uh, I want to say I did all the editing and it was perfect. I know it's not right, so I was hoping to get probably a little bit more direction, but no, it is what it is. And with like I said, with Evan, he was really like on point about editorial questions and when I was starting to spiral and edit too much, he'd pull me back. He'd be like, no, 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 leave it. It's okay. Like I started to overthink things. Like if he's jumping the car with jumper cables, they have to be forward like this, not next to each other. He's like, dude, don't worry. No, it's okay. That's not what you need to worry about, right? Like,
Right.
so it was nice. That was to me the best element was like really being able to like open up to the kind of vision of someone who knows how to work with someone because they weren't telling me what to do. They were just really kind of encouraging me to spend more time in these moments. You know,
And what about marketing support? How did that feel in the two
that was
different?
pretty good. I mean, I think it is weird to work with a budget, and they've got like, I mean, they're very clear. Like, I made a couple suggestions. Like, I wanted pens and postcards because I felt like I can, and they would love that. So they bought 300 postcards and 500, 200 pens, and I gave them out everywhere I went. So that was real fun. They did support me on a book tour, which I'd never had anyone do anything like that ever. They were very clear on what they would and would not pay for, and so that was nice. And that was really nice to not have to do all the emailing for setting up a book tour.
Mhm.
Like I could be like, I want to do and I did various, as someone who's done a lot of touring and had to set it all up myself, I'm very comfortable reading in non-bookstore locations. So they worked with me. Like I would be like, I want to do a backyard party in Santa Rosa. Can you reach out to the bookstore and maybe they can set up like a table there? And so they did that. And it was funny. They never responded to the a publisher, but then I reached out to Chaucer's Books in Santa Rosa, and they agreed to do it for me. So it's a note to self. It's like personal connections are really important, even though you get a mainstream publisher. Like it's important that you still need to make those, do that work some of it yourself.
Right,
But they set up Powell's, they set up Elliott Bay Book. So that was really, and that's a lot of work as someone, I'm sure you've done this, like
right,
setting up
right,
a book tour is a lot of like kind of like organizational work that I think I'm good at, but I don't really enjoy, right? So,
right, right. And it's also just a lot of like coming back,
right,
right? It's like
right.
your phone, they're
Yeah,
not there. You have to call again. They're not. Blah, blah.
yeah.
It's
And
like
and I will say that also the number one thing that both publishers did, and I always tell someone, and whenever you get like a book out, make sure that you do this, is like sending copies to, like, oh yeah, like they had to send um, copies of this book to all these to the awards, right? Penn, Lambda, Forward. Um, if your publisher's not doing that, I think that's the one thing you got to advocate for 100% because I got everything because of a result of those contests that it got nominated. I didn't even win them, right? I was just a finalist for them, and it got me. So it's like now I
yeah,
realize for everyone, like send it, even if you DIY it yourself, like send them out. And so it was important. Although it's a funny story, like they ran out of copies from the printer, and it was like the deadline was coming up for the pen. And she's like, "Do you have your copies? Will you send them?" I was like, "Oh, geez." So I sent my own copies, and of course they gave me my copies back. But I'm so thankful I did it because
right,
I got the award.
right. So, but did you have the awards on your radar? Like, did you know how important they were going to be? And
I think I knew, but I didn't quite understand how significant they were. So we didn't do, I think they knew the pen, I knew the lambda. I mean, they knew the lambda as well, but I advocated for the lambda.
Mhm.
Um, the Penn Hemingway they did. I think we did one other big one that it didn't get. Um, And then I think that, the forward one, that's just kind of, they do that routinely where they send their books to be reviewed. And then in
Mhm.
the review process, it just
Or
makes
pick
its
it
own
up.
way, right?
Right.
So yeah, with Algonquin, they were really great. They anywhere I wanted to. So at that point, then I was like, oh, I need to know these awards. Like that's important, right? And so like with the Golden Poppy, I was really happy that I didn't get this one into the Golden Poppy because I didn't even know. Although it's a relatively new award, so I don't think maybe it was around then. But the California Book Award, which I was very bummed I didn't get this year, but whatever, we'll see. Next year, the next book will be there. Because I feel like also with marketing with Algonquin, I was like, this is a very West Coast book. Like I think if we can really, like, I would love to get reviewed in Kansas City and Florida, but like I mean, that would be great, but like if you're going to spend any attention and any money, let's do it in a place that maybe it'll have more sway. And so that's why I think it was really important that I went to the Independent Bookseller Conference here in Oakland, and it was in California this year, and those kind of like decisions were really important.
Mhm. And um did you gosh, this fell out of my head again. All right, never mind, I'll come back to it later. But it was about awards, it was about submissions. What was it? No, I've lost it. Sorry, this has been
It'll come
happening
back.
more and more ever since I turned 50. Which was a long time ago, by the way. But yeah. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So did you have your conversations about marketing with a marketing team at these
Yep.
publishers? So you kind of like had a marketing intake kind of meeting and you need to
Yeah. And
describe
I
the
bombed it.
process
I
for
think
everyone.
with my Algonquin, I really bombed it because I think I didn't quite get marketing in the way that I maybe do now. Because with the smaller press, there was no marketing thing. It was like, we're just publishing it. It's on our website, you share it on your media. There you go. Right. But
But
with,
obviously they submitted for you, right?
yeah, they did submit things for me. Right. But with Algonquin, they really wanted to know, like, they really asked me questions like who the audience is, like where could it be marketed, and I kind of just didn't, I'm like, it's everyone should love it, like,
Mhm.
I realized and I still to this day struggle with that kind of marketing knowledge. I think it's not. I've been doing my own kind of due diligence about listening to other, like, there's a couple podcasts about book marketing, so I can understand it better because I don't think. I have the privilege because it's not my main source of income to like feel like it's my art and I don't have to market it, right? But that's not true. Like if I want to sell the next book, I've got to sell this book effectively, and that's what they want to buy the next book. So I think that's something I have to do more work on, right? Is how to better support. And a good friend of mine said the same thing. She's like, you've been working on this book for 5 years. You got to put that hustle in for years after. Like,
Right,
know how to sell your book. And so
right. Yeah.
like some people are like, shy. They don't want to say like, "Hi, I'm in a bookstore. This is my book. Can I sign it?" Like, and she's like, "Do it. You just do it." So
Yeah. Yeah, I, and do you do it? You go and, well, so my thing, what I tell my writers is you always go to the bookstore, you always offer to sign your book because then they can't return them.
right,
Yay. And you also go to the shelf and you turn them facing out because in a lot of bookstores you have to pay for the forward face.
right,
So you're not gonna get that unless all your friends go in like a little hive of bees and
right,
forward face your books for
right.
wherever they find them. So.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing I realized too. The difference between a small press and a big press was that, like, I felt like with a small press, a lot of book selling, I felt like I could impact it. Like I can, but with this, I have no impact on how to, is it selling and being ordered in books across California? I hope so, but I have no say, right? There's so many books being published in mainstream books that you've got about a, 4 month window. And I can barely get bookstores who know me here to keep it in stock. Like if I'm struggling with Oakland bookstores, how am I expecting any bookstores in the state of California, let alone the United States, to
Yeah.
reorder my book when after they bought two and then they sell them? Like then what, right? So I think
Right.
that's actually for me, I think one of the more daunting parts. It's just like I just realized, wow, it's so. I mean, maybe it could be kind of freeing, where it's like it's just out of my control. There's nothing I can really do. I can't. Yeah, I mean, tell me what to do, I would do it, but there's nothing. And so,
Right, right,
what it's really got to live and die on its own. But it allows me to focus on the next book. So
right, right. Yeah, it kind of rolls on. Well, you're at least talking to,
yeah,
to us tonight about it.
yeah, I know. Thank you for having me here and giving me the opportunity.
You're
Now
very
everyone go buy the book. I'm joking.
welcome. I do want everybody to go buy the book.
Yeah.
But so now we've got about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to open it to the floor and let everybody else ask their questions of you. So raise your hands if you have a question, everyone. You do it with the little thing down at the bottom that will prioritize on my screen for me. Anybody have anything? Has our conversation been so thorough that there are no questions out there? Monica, let me just pin you, Monica, so that we get to see you as you ask your question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This has been really interesting. You sound just like your book in a lot of ways, so it
Ah, thank you.
was fun. Um, so my question is, I love your crowd scenes.
Mhm.
How do you think about writing those? And maybe it's some of the same ways that you've talked about it here, but I'm just really curious.
Crowd
So,
scenes, like when they're at the concert, or is there a
um,
scene in particular?
I was thinking about the one um, there in so there's Lena and Terrence and Chino and then just and Metal and just a whole bunch of people and they're crowding around they're like going through Oakland or something. They
Right.
start out, I think, at a bookstore.
Oh yeah, I know what scene you're talking about.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
they keep going.
yeah, yeah. That's where
And
they do their guerrilla kind of marking
yeah,
up of like various literary spots in the mission.
yeah, yeah, that,
You bring up a really good point because there's a number of scenes in the book where initially I had all the characters there, and at times it felt like, is my internet okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, it said internet unstable on my side, so I was like, oh no. Anyways, um, yeah, I love that kind of large group conversation, but it does get unwieldy, and I felt like there were some parts that I could keep, like the bookstore scene, um, and then there were other scenes where I had more characters involved, but I ended up just cutting out the characters for like kind of flow sake. Um, so it's a tricky thing to have, like 4 or 5 characters in one scene, but I do think if you can work it, it really makes it kind of vibrant.
mhm,
And I don't know if
mhm.
I answered your question about how to do it. I think I just some felt like everyone needed to be there, and some felt like, oh, there's too many people here, and it's as much as I love the banter and the jokes, I gotta kind of get the focus for that scene,
Yeah.
clearer.
So how do you do the flow? Because what I noticed is that you keep everybody in the scene somehow or another.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's hard. I mean, I'm writing a wedding scene and it's really hard because, you're deciding how much do you want this character to be heard and how much do you want to keep involved with the rest. And it's not like a movie where everybody's just on the screen and you can see all the
Right.
nonverbal. So,
Yeah, I think that's partly where I appreciate, like, I don't do a lot of detailed description of like what's around them, and you just kind of hit that like dialogue scene. So, and I would also think about like, I would overwrite the scene where there was more discussion than need be, and then I would start cutting out like what really needs to happen there. And if I do want 4 voices, I've got to bring in the voice pretty consistently through the page. So if a voice says one thing and then doesn't come back for a page, it's probably, do they really need to be there? And if they do, then I really need to add their interaction a little bit more. And I would, of course, do this all in revision stage, not in the editing stage. In the editing, I mean, in the writing stage. The writing stage, I'll write, everything's a little bit longer and more clunky. And then it's like that honing, that kind of tersing out what really needs to be there.
okay. Okay. Yeah, that answers it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Monica. Kat, you had a question. You're up next.
Hi. So, of course, thank you for being here. I have 3 questions, somewhat roughly interrelated, but I'll throw them all at you and see how you want
Yeah.
to
Let's bring them
deal with
on.
them. The first is you mentioned you were listening to podcasts about book publishing and how to do that. I was wondering if you could drop the podcast, share with us.
Right.
The other is you were talking about kind of this field of self-promotion and looking at awards as a path to that self-promotion. How do you discern when you're starting out what are respectable competitions that you might be a fit for? What are money grabs?
Right.
And then once you're sort of doing that, what else are you doing outside of your publishing company to consistently market yourself, publicize yourself, promote yourself, so
Right.
that aspect is also desirable down the
Right.
line?
Yeah, I'll start from the last one. I do think there's other things to do along with, the submission process to awards is like if you can engage in workshops, like the Bay Area Book Festivals this weekend, right? Like that was a submission based one, so you had to submit a book, and then they kind of if they fit you in. So that's participating in those kind of like literary communities is really important. Um, I also tried to like come up with a few essays to write, and they always push you to do the essays, especially mainstream press. It's like, can you write an essay about why you wrote the book? Can you write an essay about the theme of the book? Can you write? And I do think that's kind of a useful thing, get maybe two or three of them out there. Lit Hub, Electric Lit, things like that. We'll publish them. And then I also think it's, and this is where I'm doing, you help each other out, your community. Uh, agree to interview each other. Like I have friends and I would be like, let me ask you questions. I can try and find a place to publish the interview, right? But or just in our Substack or whatever. So um, those are really useful ways to keep your name out there, right? Um, and so oh, and then the question about the yeah, if anything felt too like expensive, I would be suspect about it. Like, some of the big awards, like I think it's the National Book Award is I mean, maybe you might know more about this than I do, but there's a $150 fee and like 5 books, right? So that felt a little steep, and they said they would or would not pay for it. I can't remember. I don't think they did. Um, but it's mostly expensive in sending books out, So if in your contract you can get like, hey, I know I'm going to end up sending out 20 to 25 copies of my book to contests, to conferences, to awards. Like if make sure you can get them at cost. Um, and so that was something really, I wish I would have known about with, Acre Book was really great, but they only gave me 5 copies of my book. And so I ended up having to buy like, and I actually did because I went on tours myself, and some bookstores don't necessarily, buy small press books. So it was more I think advantageous to have, to buy 50 copies of my book. With, this one, I tried to only, that's where the marketing really team did help. Like this one, I was like, I only got my 20 copies. And then every time I saw something that they needed a copy of the book, I just sent my marketing team, can you send them? Can you send them? Can you send them? And they were great. I think they did. A couple times they made a decision not to do it without consulting me, and then I thought that we had submitted and we didn't, and I was a little irritated. But you have to be kind of an advocate for yourself in that one. And the first question, I can't remember what was that one.
Your link to
Oh, well,
Podcast.
there's this person I think the first name's right, Kathleen Schmidt, and she does Publishing Confidential. Um, and that is phenomenal one. That is like she's like very high end publishing, and but it was really, she's really she asks you to really think about things like, everyone thinks about like social media as a important tool, and she's kind of like, I don't know if that really is an important tool, right? And then she gives you reviews TikTok and all these things, and then she reviews yeah, she does a lot. It's Publishing Confidential is what it is, and it's a Substack now, but you could also hear her on other people podcasts. I think she did a with Brad Listy. I really like that podcast, and that he often does publishing conversations with people. It's
Who was
called
that again?
Other People, but it's spelled weird. I think it's like Other People like that or something like. Yeah, I think it's this right here. That might be wrong, but Brad Listy is says that's my favorite kind of literary podcast I listen to. And Kathleen Schmidt is the woman who does Publishing Confidential.
Thank you so much. I
No problem.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
thanks for your questions, Kat. Anybody else? I don't have any hands up. Um, while anybody's thinking of more questions, should there be any, there is. Oh, Carol. Good. You can. I was about to read your question. You can ask your question yourself, Carol.
This question I put up here. I was always curious about how people find university presses because, I'm from Ohio. I never would have imagined your book landing with the University of
I
Cincinnati.
know.
So I'm wondering, how did you locate that and decide to submit to that, et cetera?
Well, and that's another one of these things where it's really about like literary community. A friend of mine posted that they just sold their book to this thing, and I went to that website
Oh,
and they were looking for books, and I sent it in. So literally, that's how it happened, And I still do that. Like I still really like, because I still try and publish things online. Like I got a short story published coming out soon, and but like when I follow, other writers I know or in communities, my writing groups will just share like, oh, I saw a call for this, I saw a call for that, and so it
hmm.
really word of mouth, I guess, should is for me is like the number one um, way I find out about things.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, so in the last minutes here, I wanted to ask you about you were talking about the importance of community, and I see that you're teaching. Tell us about your teaching life.
I'm teaching a creative writing fiction class in the fall. It's very, that's at Berkeley City College. That's where, that's my primary source of employment. And I'm very grateful for being there for the last 20 years. And, I've been able to teach books that I really want to read personally in my classes. I get to really remind myself, every semester about the joy of writing and discovering your voice with, new writers. And even in the comp classes, I still find a lot of joy and seeing people like come to their kind of like, I just try and facilitate a space where they can, they discover what it's like to kind of, wow, engage with thought through writing. And that's really inspiring. I do teach at the Antioch MFA program, and it's funny because like the same classes I kind of teach at the community college, I teach at the MFA program similarly, and all those students are different, but it's just kind of it's a nice connection to see how they work in different environments. And I really love a low, although I will say I never did get an MFA. Like I don't have one. And I came through writing through that kind of like DIY community. And so I actually think it's a nice though reminder that the MFA schools are really there's things I realize every time I'm in an MFA environment, like, oh, I would have really benefited from this if I had done this path. But it's also nice to know that you don't have to have done that path to
Right.
become the writer you want to be. So
Right.
it's nice. I feel like it's a nice juxtaposition of both experiences. And then I'm also teaching this coming semester one class at USF on bodies, which I'm really excited
Oh,
about. Yeah.
that's very perfect for you.
Writing from the body, about the body. Body is like site of so much kind of,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's
intersection. So it'll be fun.
yeah, that will be fun. So your just to clarify, Berkeley City College, you teaching undergrads or you teaching in continuing ed kind
I don't
of?
know if I mean, it's undergrad. Well, the creative writing classes are open to anyone. There's no prerequisite. So I get your 18-year-old just broke up with her boyfriend, want to write angry poems about love. I get, elders coming in at post-retirement, trying to like I've got a story to tell. So it's a really nice mix. And generally I found it's really been, I think, beneficial for everyone there. They kind of get what they need. They get to see various and reminded about various things. So, I mean, sadly, sometimes I'll get people come in and I go like, I've got my 300-page manuscript. Can I workshop it? Like, that's not what we're going to do. But, we are going to talk about writing and read excerpts from our writing and generate new writing. But yeah, it's very pleasurable.
And so frankly, who do you, because yeah, I teach continuing ed as well. And I've taught like some undergrad before, and I very much prefer teaching continuing ed.
Yeah, no, me too. That's
You
why I'm a little bit worried about
do.
the USF class with all these grad students that think they know everything. I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, why don't you teach the class?
That's theirs. Joey Sullivan, who's on, used to for years teach at USF, so
Oh, nice.
she can tell you what to expect.
Please.
Um, yeah, and so the MFA at Antioch, are you with Lisa
Yeah,
Lacasa?
Lisa's the kind of head person.
Right. Oh, it's very cool that you're teaching in an MFA program with an MFA. That's hard.
Yeah,
That's a hard thing to do. Congratulations.
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm also doing the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference this year, so I'm excited
Oh,
about that.
you are? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
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 that's great.
yeah. I was
Um,
actually a student there, like I don't know, 8, 9 years ago.
you know that I was ED there for a while.
What was that?
I was the executive director before Lisa.
Oh, wow, there you go. Well, you were probably executive director when I was a student there, so nice.
All the ways our paths cross.
Yes,
Um, but yes, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
no
And
problem.
really nice to see that it's been going so well. Like the last time we spoke was in a smoky bar.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Well, hopefully I'll see you in another smoky bar soon sometime, but otherwise, yes, it's nice
yes, for
to
sure.
catch up.
And I think that are you still in touch with Michael, David Lucas, and Danny and that crowd?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
I think Danny's going to be at the Bay Area Book Festival, and I'm going to be there, and I think yeah, a whole bunch of people are there. So you all should come and say hello if you're there. Please feel free
okay.
to stop me and say hi.
And on that note, I also wanted to kind of circle back to your writing letters thing that you publicize everywhere that you like actually receiving letters and writing letters back. So uh you guys can, if you want to write to Tomas, you can just find his address like on his website, but you actually do write back to everybody, right?
Except I have one story where this young man wrote me the most beautiful letter from Texas. It was so just loving and kind. And of course, he said, "You don't have to write back. I just wanted to tell you how much your work meant for me." And I was so excited to write back. And then I lost the letter. Like I had it in like a book, and I don't know what book it is. To this day, I still search, and it breaks my heart to think I didn't write back to this person. I'm so sad. But yes,
Well, let's hope that by some strange kismet he watches this video
yeah, exactly right.
and and he'll know to come right to you again with his address.
Right, right, exactly.
Okay, everyone, if you can pop your mics back on and just give Tomas a round of applause. Thank you so much for like coming and spending the time.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
And best of luck with everything going forward. And I hope that I'll bump into you like the next time I go drinking with Michael.
There we go. Oh, I think he's going to do that. Yeah, yeah, definitely.